question about how we continue to work forward in our challenging legislative and political times in Illinois. So I'd like to bring up real quickly Dave Winters to talk about what we are doing in Springfield. I first met Dave when he was a legislator representing the area around Rockford. Dave then championed a bill that allowed the state to buy railroad rolling stock, which was an important step towards the locomotives that will soon be running in Illinois, Michigan, and Missouri. He was a board member for a while and is now serving as our lobbyist in Springfield.
Thank you, Rick. The first thing I need to note is that we have one of the core legislators who are now serving in Springfield with us today. Michelle Mussman in the back is the chairman of the Mass Transit District, or the Mass Transit Committee. She's allowed to move from corner her and ask her the inner details. But it is interesting to note that transportation, we have two committees, one for vehicles and one for roads. And they don't consider anything other than concrete and rubber. So having a mass transit committee, it seemed like that's the area where we can have the most influence. And we're particularly happy that Michelle is here today. I'm bringing you some good news and bad news from Springfield. In the short term, the good news, well, let me start with the bad news. The bad news is the legislature was not paid after the 1st of May last year until this week. So they had a huge amount of money just suddenly come in, and they're in a lot better mood this week. So that's the good news. And I have to say that the image of Speaker Madigan and Governor Rauner kind of butting heads really linked. I'm a farmer by trade. And every once in a while you run across a farmer who finds a couple of dead deer in the woods, 2 bucks that are smashing heads, and they manage to get their antlers interlocked. Now normally when you have 2 leaders butting heads, one of them will finally get injured, they'll twist a leg or something, and that buck then will leave the field of combat and the other one reigns supreme. But these 2 guys have got their antlers locked, and once they're locked, they cannot get apart. And they'll end up dying. One of them may die of dehydration. He may have a broken leg. He may twist his neck badly enough that he can't stand anymore. The other buck dies with him because he can't drag the dead carcass with him. And I think that that's the image we have in Springfield. These guys are locked in combat to the death. And I don't know that they're going to be able to unlock over the next few years. The medium-term good news and bad news is that the good news is that IDOT actually has a full budget. They're the only major agency that received a budget last year and for the last 2 years, primarily because when you see the road crews pull out and the potholes are not fixed, the construction barricades stay there for week after week after week, and no activity is happening, the voters pay attention. And the intense heat of having IDOT not have a project or not have a budget led the governor and the speaker and the Senate president to actually pass a budget for IDOT. So we're able to pay the almost $50 million state subsidy for Amtrak each year. That's the good news. The bad news is we have a new budget that starts the 1st of July, and there doesn't seem to be any agreement. In fact, Moody's Investor Services just 2 days ago announced that, guys, this is really serious. Your credit rating is the lowest of any state in the country, and if we don't see a budget by the 31st of May, which is the constitutional deadline for a new budget without going into a supermajority, we don't see a budget, there's going to be additional downgrades. We can guarantee it, and that's coming from Moody's. In the long term, the good news is that we actually introduced language that went to the Mass Transit Committee that would have taken the Illinois Toll Highway Authority language and set up another authority, which would be a high-speed rail authority. Its sole focus would be to develop true 220-mile-an-hour service We think the most logical segments would be from Union Station to Champaign, 45 minutes. Frequency up to 12 a day. And that's what you were talking about, is getting the frequency so that people can count that there's another train in another hour. Unfortunately, half of the trains would then go to Indianapolis, and half would go to Springfield and on to St. Louis. But you're looking at travel time at slightly over 2 hours to St. Louis from Union Station. You could be able to reach Springfield in an hour and a half, which beats the hell out of car travel. And you don't have the wear and tear. You can actually do work on the train. So that's the good news. The bad news is we didn't get it out of committee. We ran into a buzzsaw because IDOT said, what do you mean? You're going to take dollars out of the public treasury that we can't control? And we think everything transportation ought to be centralized in IDOT. The nice thing is we've started to identify some allies. We've started to develop the arguments as to why the legislature should look at a separate and parallel agency focused solely on high-speed rail. And one of those is the word I just used, focus. IDOT has to worry about airports, they have to worry about mass transit in Chicago, they have to worry about bus lines downstate. Their primary purpose is in road construction. They cannot focus, and the other element that they have to be concerned about is next year's budget. They are, of all state agencies, they're actually the best at long-term planning, but I think a 5-year time horizon is about as far out as IDOT can reach until we actually acquire a right-of-way that doesn't have freight trains on it, build the electrified tracks, and get the train sets ready to run. So an agency that is concerned only with that, a single focus, instead of the multi-focus that IDOT has, is one selling point. And the other is that you get continuity. Today, if we had IDOT try to set up a high-speed network and the governorship changes, the Secretary of Transportation changes, the focus of that agency could easily say, well, we've already spent some money, but we're a long way away from high-speed rail, let's put it on the back burner. If you have a single focused agency, we're going to continue on with the appointment by the governor. You have continuing board members that would carry on the work that the previous administration had already set up. And we are developing, I think, some very good allies. The University of Illinois is probably the prime example. I spoke twice to the president of the university this last week. He seems very interested, and they know that that would enhance their ability to become and remain a world-class university, because 45-minute train time from Champaign to Union Station is a game changer for their recruitment of faculty, for attracting students in from all over the world. If they can get to O'Hare and fly home to Beijing, and it's only an hour trip time to O'Hare, it's a lot different than being 200 miles away in the middle of the cornfields. The feeling of isolation in Champaign is a detriment to that university. High-speed rail can solve that issue. The university is very interested in that. So it's a time of incredible anxiety in Springfield. The back bills that we are facing is not going to allow this state to move ahead for 15 or 20 years. We're going to be paying off the past bills that unfortunately the General Assembly and the governors for administrations back the last 20 or 30 years have not paid their bills. That bill is coming due. It's so serious that I think that ultimately the dam's going to break. We're going to see the tax increases that are needed. We're not going to see growth of state government, but hopefully if we have a focused agency with its own funding source through a high-speed rail authority, we can get high-speed rail moving again in Illinois. And that's the good news that I'll leave you with. Thank you very much.